So what I am getting from you saying that all the white characters are villains, while ignoring the laborers, Professor Kraft, and the housekeeper, all of which are white, tells me that your problem is not that all the white characters are villains. Your problem is that in this book there is no white savior. So hey y'all, it's Kalia Monique. My first name's Kalia, my middle name's Monique. It's Kalia Monique. I would just like to preface this video with I had every intention of doing a book talk, TLAK, for Babel when I finished the book at the end of September. October was very busy for me, and when I was super determined to do it in November, my mental health and anxiety told me that my opinion wasn't important and that it was too late. But Bookstagram has decided to lose its ever-loving mind. So if anything, thank you to these posts for reminding me that my voice and perspective do in fact matter. I was so inspired to do a book talk for Babel because much like the only other book talk that is on my channel from the very beginning of me doing my channel, it's Ace of Spades, the only one that's on my channel. I had every intention of doing more, but I just never had that inclination to do them, and I didn't want to force one. What I really loved about the Ace of Spades one is that I just was like, I love this book. Let me go through all my annotations to tell you why. Like, that was just really fun for me to just have, like, no, like, all inhibitions were gone. And it was just like, woo! You know, like, that freedom of that, and especially the freedom of having just started my channel. It was just like, what I want to do, I'm going to do. But much like Ace of Spades, reading Babel, I had this moment where I was just like, I'm not alone. Like, someone else experienced this too. And they were eloquent enough and patient enough to write down their experiences, write down their words, create a story surrounding it, and brave enough to share it with us all so that people like me can say, I'm not alone. And as a avid reader who has been reading for years, like, reading has been such a huge part of my life for many, many years of my life, I can't say that there have been many books like that. There haven't been many books where I am the main character, or I am more than just or a character that looks like me is more than just a secondary character and is more than just a supporting role. Like, we finally get to be the leads, and so that means the absolute world to me. I don't have to insert myself into a narrative. I'm finally being told that I can be a lead character. I can be the main character of whatever story, and a plot can progress. I can be the hero of whatever story, and I'm very happy for younger generations having stuff like this to know. First of all, you are the main character, but if you don't believe you are the main character, then let me tell you that you can be. That is just so very important, and I clearly forgot that in November because I told myself my opinion didn't matter, but here we are. If anything, much like Ace of Spades, let this be my virtual flowers to R.F. Kuang, just saying thank you. Thank you for writing this and for being brave enough to share it with the world despite whatever opinions are out there. Sharing your story and your experiences and writing a story like this really does mean the world to people like me who haven't gotten the chance to be the lead in a story or be the main character in a story like this, and a main character in a story that is fantasy focused or academia focused, and finally inserting people of color, marginalized identities as no longer being marginalized, putting us in the forefront of the story where we always belonged because we were always there. Despite what history will tell you or what other popular books will tell you, we are way more than just a supporting character. That is what Babel means to me. It is just so well done. I'm going to reference some things that I've seen in the Bookstagram post just to be like, just because I need to say them. But for the most part, this script, that I did write out a script in November. Unlike Ace of Spades, I did not annotate the copy of the book that I have on this one because I really could not get it in myself to mess up the beautiful end papers. So instead, I do have some like notes that are like right here. But some people on Instagram have decided to cancel R.F. Kuang because she wrote a book that did not center white voices and was honest in the racism in academia and what people of color go through in academia. Drawing on her own experiences at Oxford, have somehow decided that her story is inaccurate because it depicts white people as the villains. So she has decided to depict history from the gaze of those who were oppressed instead of the oppressor. Yeah, don't know if y'all know this, but our history books, the things that we read in academia, things we read for school and are often taught in schools, are centered in the white perspective and the perspective of the colonizers because they fucking won. History is told by the victors. It is not the right way history went. It is not the concrete depiction of what occurred in history. It is simply the narrative that the victors are able to spread about their stories. It does not take into account the people whose lands were pillaged and destroyed by the victors, by the colonizers. It doesn't take into account the cultures that were destroyed and are currently extinct or dying off. It does not take into account the pain and the agony that it has caused multiple cultures throughout it, especially if you live in a country that is predominantly white. I'm going to just assume and probably be quite accurate in saying white people are the focus of your history books, never taking into account the people of color who have been harmed in the process of what you have glorified as the truth of history. It is not glory. It is not beautiful when your people are the ones being attacked, when your land is the one that was colonized, when your people are the ones that were, your land was the one that was pillaged and your ancestors are the ones put in chains. That's not fucking pretty. And so, for once, a book is focused on the history from our perspective and you're saying that we are villainizing you. I am so sorry that history is mean to you when those that have been silenced for years finally speak up. But that is exactly what happens when you silence and oppress the voices of those for generations and for centuries. At some point, when you want to feign equality and acceptance and we finally get to speak up, we're going to speak about what we have experienced in life and tell the story from our perspective, how we see it, and what generations before us had to deal with. To be mad that you are the villain of that story is to ignore this story entirely, because guess what? It is not about you. Yes, there are some parts that do not put white people in a happy gaze, but guess what? It's not always happy over here. As a black woman in America, it's not always happy in here. Generations before me have struggled so that I could be in the place that I currently am, so that I can speak up about what generations before me have gone through, and so that I can share my perspective. And just because it does not align with yours does not invalidate it at all. And instead of thinking that you're the victim in this, why don't you actually educate yourself? Why don't you actually listen? Just two things I want to mention from the Bookstagram post directly. To say that all white people in this book were villains and therefore the book was racist to white people and people were not understanding, people in the book were not forgiving enough or understanding enough of Letty. And to state again that all white people in this book were villains, except don't mention Professor Kraft because she played a minor role. There are four main characters in this book: Robin, Rami, Letty, and Victoire. Letty is the only white one. Now, if we are going to head to our supporting cast, there are more white people. And yes, characters such as Professor Lovell, Letty herself as a main character, and other white characters did present plenty of problems. However, to say that all the white characters were villains is inaccurate. Professor Kraft, that you want to ignore, she was not a villain. She stood with them for the most part during the lockdown. The labor workers who were first presented as a problem were white, and the labor workers actually decided to create and enforce the barricade that protected the scholars, providing communications back and forth between the army and the scholars, therefore protecting the scholars. The labor workers were white. That is a very important role. Being the barrier, protecting those that were inside. That's an important role. That's not a minor role at all. They were white. They were allies. They were supportive. Dr. Lovell's housemaid or housekeeper who Robin came to look to as kind of like a mother figure or a calming, caring, nurturing figure at the very least, she was white. She was Scottish. Never was her character seen as evil. So what I am getting from you saying that all the white characters are villains, while ignoring the laborers, Professor Kraft, and the housekeeper, all of which are white, tells me that your problem is not that all the white characters are villains. Your problem is that in this book there is no white savior. And if you are seeking a white savior, Hunger Games, Divergent, anything SJM or JLA writes, there is your white savior. Go read their books. There are so many books out there. Books that I've had to read when I was younger, books that are still being published today that have a white main character saving the world with whatever person of color sidekick or love interest that there is. The majority of publishing is filled with white saviors. Like, you can find your white savior all throughout the fantasy section, all throughout sci-fi. We find people of color finally get a story that they get to be the center of, that they get to be the saviors in, and you're mad because the white people who were on the good side did exactly what allies do, and instead of centering their voice and their perspective, sat back and simply supported the voice of those that were being disenfranchised, those that are marginalized. Professor Kraft said, do as you want to do, I will sit here and support. The labor workers said, do as you want to do, we will sit here and protect you. That is what an ally does. That is what an ally does. They don't sit center stage with those that are actually sharing their lived experience. No. They support those that are talking about their lived experiences to share those further. Instead of centering them in another person's trauma, centering themselves in another person's lived experience and story, instead they sit back and let that person share their experiences for themselves, which is what this... I just realized I never picked up the book, which is what this book does the entire time. For once, history is told from the perspective of a marginalized person or persons, multiple, who have spent their entire life shrinking their own identities, shrinking their own cultures to fit within English society, to fit within the dominant culture that they are in. It is just frustrating that finally we get to be the center of a story and y'all want to talk about how it's racist to white people. Oh my God. There's no such thing. And I am also just so sick and tired of every time I hear about reverse racism, it is from somebody who is in a predominantly white country. Racism does not mean that somebody is being mean to you. Racism is not calling somebody a Karen. Racism is what happens when a person who is at a place of power uses that power and privilege to oppress those that they see as beneath them. A Asian woman writing a book about a book inspired by her own experiences at Oxford is not racist for discussing her experience in Oxford simply because it does not shine a happy rainbow light on every white character. That's not racist. That is discussing your lived experience. Why is that so offensive to you? Oh, I know, because you have yet to do the work that is needed to actually see your own privileges. You get to be the main character in every story. You get to be the white savior. You get to be the one that saves us all. You get to be the idealized fantasy for so many. And for once, we put ourselves in fantasy. For once, we put ourselves in the center of the story. You got a problem because white people aren't presented as the saviors you think you are. I'm sorry, but you're not. As a black woman in America, I can promise you that white people did not save my ancestors. I would just like to say, because this is a very important part of Babel, I would say as well, very important message. You can't And it's going to come up when I talk about the character of Letty. Anger is a valid emotion, and I'm just sick of people saying that it is not. I'm sick of people being like, you didn't present your claims to me in a nice way, therefore I will not hear it. I will not be attacked by your angry words. You do not get to tell me how to feel about the things you have said that have harmed me. And I'm sick and tired of that being the thing that is rooted in civility, which is rooted in colonization and a history of shitty people. Okay? How horrible and how triggering it is to be told, oh, you can't do that because that's mean and that's too much and you're angry and you can't lead with your anger because then they'll never respect you. I don't need your respect. I just need basic human decency. There was also a stance that Letty was somehow the least racist person in the book because she treated her friends equally to everyone else. If the best thing you can do for me is treat me the way you treat everyone else, what exactly do you want me to do with that? Do you want a cookie? Do you want a pat on the back? You want a hug? It is not asking a lot for acknowledgement of the generations of trauma that your ancestors have been put through to at least be acknowledged by those who say that they care for you. To say that Letty is a stereotype, to say that she is a caricature, unless y'all are operating in the world as caricatures and stereotypes, I can tell you from my own lived experiences that I've had Lettys in my life. I have loved and care for Lettys in my life. People who I have thought were my friends. Lettys are out here. In 2022, Lettys are out here, okay? She wasn't that far off from people that I've encountered in my own life. Just to say that she's a stereotype or a caricature is ridiculous because she was honestly the most honest depiction of someone such as herself, and what the other characters experienced with her was a more accurate experience of my own feelings with them. When Victoria and Robin are really contemplating how much they wanted to believe in her, they wanted to believe that she would stand with them, that I have felt many times in my life, like especially in academia, especially me going to PWI, which, if you do not know, is a predominantly white institution, especially getting my education and higher education at a PWI. Have I experienced Lettys who I wanted to believe actually cared for me as a person, who I wanted to ignore the constant microaggressions, the odd comments, the constant validation they needed and approval they needed from me as their Black friend, to validate them as a good guy and to excuse past behaviors or the behaviors of their family members. The amount of times that I have been confronted and asked on how can I be a better ally in a classroom, when the only answer, I got my answer now. You want to learn how to be an ally? Read Babel. Ask yourself how you feel about the white characters in this book and do your own self-reflection. Read other books. There are a number of nonfiction books that you can read as well. To ignore those instances because we have fun when we are studying, or because they're a funny person, because we have good times here or there. Those good moments are always what you draw on when the microaggression happens, when they are seeking this validation of being the hero of the story or being this good guy simply for treating you like a human being. You're not doing anything extraordinary by treating another human being as a human being. Treating somebody equally is not something you should be proud of. It is the bare minimum of what you can do. Treating a human being just like you treat every other human being is quite literally the bare minimum you can do. And I am tired of us acting like that is some great feat. It is not hard at all. I do it every damn day. The whole reason that this is not supposed to be in response to the Bookstagram post is because it is not my job as a Black woman to explain the constant microaggressions, racism, and the racism and harmful message in these posts. That is not my job, and I am absolving myself of the burden of constantly having to explain racism to people. I am going to allow myself to simply exist and love a book for finally centering people like me, people of color who have sought higher education and have constantly been presented with reminders that they are not like everyone else in the room. To finally be seen in that aspect, to finally be seen in that regard is important, and I'm not going to allow what was supposed to be a character analysis of the four main characters of Babel to be turned into a response and a thesis on the impacts of racism. But you have to be a certain type of just unbelievably rude to tell somebody that their perspective is wrong because it counters your own. To tell someone that their experiences are invalid because it goes against what your own experience is. I would just like to remind people that throughout almost everyone's identity, there are privileges that we all hold, and there are marginalizations and disadvantages that we all hold within our identities. If you find yourself being a person of privilege, telling someone who is marginalized in that scenario that their story isn't valid and that their experience isn't valid because it is not your own, or you feel as though it sets you and your privileges as a villain, you really need to educate yourself. You really need to reflect on that. You know who can tell my story better than you can? Me. So let me tell it. When I first read these posts on Instagram, I found myself saying, oh, well, they're from a predominantly white country. I don't know what education they've had. The history books don't really tell this side of the story, or there's not much that is taught in schools. Some people aren't where I'm at because of whatever reason, like their school didn't teach it to them, or they're from a country that doesn't really discuss this type of thing. Whatever have it, I found myself inserting myself in this person's perspective and trying to understand how they got to this place. And I would just like to say, I am so sick and tired of doing that. I find myself doing it often, and I feel like to some extent, that is one of my qualities I really love about myself. I am an awfully understanding person that tends to try to see the side of those that I don't agree with and put myself in their shoes. In this particular case, I recognize that I was putting myself in this person's shoes where they would refuse to put themselves in my shoes. They quite literally wrote this post because they refused to see a perspective that was not their own and instead decided to invalidate it. And so I would just like to say, I am so sick and tired of the responsibility of being able to see different perspectives across the spectrum, across the understanding of racism and of history and all these different factors that have gone into the different classes and different standings that we all hold in whatever country that we are living in or whatever standing we hold in the world. I am just so tired of, because I am from a marginalized identity, being able to understand where somebody from a privileged identity does not understand my own experiences. And please understand that in and of itself, thinking that Letty is nothing more than a stereotype, thinking that she is a caricature, is nothing more than your own privilege telling you that racism doesn't exist anymore, or that it's all in the past, it's all history, and we don't need to dredge it up anymore. Where people like me are still being impacted from the ugly mark that history has set before us. Like, you can't say that it was history and it no longer affects people when it is currently actively impacting people, especially in academia, when the school system from an early age isn't even set up for people of my skin color or deeper complexions or anybody from a marginalized identity to even make it to higher education. When we finally do, to have to deal with blatant racism in our face. It's as though literally all throughout elementary, middle school, and high school, they were just like, so since it's public, I'm not going to show my racism flat out. I'm just going to the students of color. I'm going to make this environment really hard for students of color to thrive in, especially in the case of the United States. I'm going to set this important test in place that will determine whether or not you get into college. But this particular test shows to disproportionately fail people of color. I'm going to put this in place and also put these very high application fees and very high tuition in place so that it is even harder for those from lower income families or people of color to get here. Just in case they manage to be able to do all of this, I'm going to set up the school system so that there are small things in place to make school a bit harder for our students of color, by such as, I don't know, having entire course lists that is nothing but white male authors or white authors in general, if they manage to get a woman in there, or having a history that only is the depiction of a white person's narrative. We're just gonna have these tiny things that are like within the system of school that are a little bit harder to notice, and you're just gonna have to deal with that throughout the 12 years in which you're in school. Again, I am basing this on living in the USA, but I'm going to do all of this from K through 12. And if you manage by some miracle to make it to higher education, I'm gonna just be blatant with my racism. I'm gonna have a fucking slave owner statue right there in front of you, just to remind you that you little were never supposed to be here in the first place. Yeah, I think that that's just about all I wanted to do when it comes to like in response to the post, because they're just harmful and I'm tired of talking about them. I'm going to go back to the script that I already had prepared. From the very beginning of reading Babel, my absolute favorite part was the characters and the complexities of these characters. There was not a single character in this book that I found myself 100% agreeing with. There was some like 75, 85% agreeing with, and some like 65, 30% agree with, like real, like, and there were some zeros. There were some people I could not agree with at all. Oh my god, I just wanted them to get off the page. Some of them did get off, but I just found that even when I couldn't completely agree with a character, or even when I outright could not stand a character, that they felt like they were fully fleshed out. For this, I will only be focusing on the 4 main characters, that being Robin, Letty, Victoire, and Rami. And I'm doing this because those are the 4 perspectives that we get in the book. Granted, for Victoire, Letty, and Rami, it was just for the interludes. We only got a small portion of them, whereas the greater story was from Robin's perspective, with the inserts of like footnotes that were just like actual like historic things that factor into the story's narrative. For the most part, the majority of the story is told through Robin's perspective, who I personally felt went through the getting to see his character arc and how much he developed throughout this book was really fascinating to me. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. It had me honestly just wishing we had gotten that from Rami and Victoire. Can't say that I was craving more of Letty's perspective, but even so, that's a possibility that I would not have been opposed to, because it was nice to see what led up to Robin making the decisions that he made. And I wish that we could have just gotten that for the other 4 main characters. Just seeing like what exactly led you here. And while we do get those in the interludes, like what led you here and why do you think the way you do, which I really love the interludes because of that. I loved seeing like, this is why this person behaves this way. This is why they think this way. These are the events that really shaped with them as an individual. I just wish we had gotten that more. And I don't know if it's because Robin as a character seemed to do his development in Oxford. Like he had that development while in school, whereas it seems as though Victoire and Rami came to Oxford with the ideals that they left it with and just acted on ideals and morals that they already held in their person coming into Oxford. They just expanded on it in Oxford. It kind of seemed like Robin had to learn and really come into his own while in Oxford, which was kind of different than the other characters. I would say Letty, again, even herself, she came into Oxford with the morals that she stood behind, and just expanded upon or were confronted with values that were different than her own that impacted how she ended up leaving Oxford in some way. And by leaving Oxford, I simply mean the lockdown, the shutout that happened. And you know, some people left not only Oxford, but life. Oh, I don't know if I want to say it like that. And since this is a spoiler section, I don't know why I'm like coding it, but I guess I just want to save it for that character. So I did actually start my character analysis with Letty because at the time I felt like she was the person I had the least to say about. And then real life Letty's came in the forefront, and I was like, this is the problem with y'all. Like, this is the issue that I was pointing to. Letty as a character I found fascinating, and I appreciated this being discussed because often when it comes to progressive movements, anything that is developed by a person of color, often Black women, and then taken over by white women, I often find myself like, this is what the issue is. I find that individuals who can only find one marginalization within their identity often have a hard time confronting the multiple marginalizations that others face, and will have a harder time acknowledging the privileges within their identity because they are so focused on the marginalization, and therefore use that as like a common ground to befriend or be in space with others that are marginalized, and then use that to highlight their experiences, highlight their story, all the while ignoring or invalidating the experiences of those that have multiple marginalizations. For example, Letty comes from a wealthy background. She is white. She is currently in academia. She is receiving her degree, and yet her marginalization is that she is a woman in the society in which technically she shouldn't be receiving her education, especially since she did have an older brother who did pass away, and who she was really had certain hangups and frustrations with. Him passing away ultimately did lead to her being able to get her higher education. She uses her marginalization as a crutch of like, I'm marginalized too. I deal with people not wanting me in the space as well. All the while ignoring the fact that Rami, Robin, Victoire all come from impoverished backgrounds or a working class background. Like, Victoire was the housemaid, or was like a servant to the people that she worked for and who kind of sponsored her. I mean, turns out she lied about that, but go off, Victoire, who sponsored her education. Rami and Robin are having their education sponsored by wealthy people that want to profit off of this colored person's academia and their work in translation, because ultimately this student seeking higher education, getting their degrees, and going into the workforce will then be able to further the expanse and the power of the British Empire, which is the ultimate goal of both of their sponsors. Letty's dad was just like, you my only kid left, so go ahead and get your education. Like, whatever. Which is unfortunate. Like, she was kind of like the throwaway child because she was a woman, but her parent was the one funding her education, and he had every chance to do so. All the while, by doing so, by ignoring the marginalizations and just saying, like, we can tough it out, she is internalizing the patriarchal system that has oppressed her and using it as a justification for her friends needing to just be like her. I think that was something that really that really frustrated me about Letty's character, is because she was able to overcome her marginalization. She expected Victoire, Rami, and Robin to do the same, where like Victoire is a Black woman. Both Rami and Victoire's skin, like, Robin is able to pass as white in certain instances, whereas Rami and Victoire are right up front, very clearly people of color, and therefore constantly being degraded and harassed simply because of the color of their skin, and people feeling as though that color, that skin tone, does not deserve to hold the Oxford uniform, essentially. It was interesting to me the way that R.F. Kuang was able to depict that even though Letty is within a system that is oppressing her, because she is a woman, her father wouldn't have given her an education if she was not his only child left. Because she is a woman, her father never valued her before, and honestly doesn't really anymore, like still doesn't. She still internalizes that patriarchal propaganda, and I can't help but think that is because she knows that even though she is marginalized in one way or another, she still holds many privileges, that being the fact that she comes from money, and ultimately much like Robin, she was able to disguise the things that people had. Like, she could disguise herself to be accepted until, people would get to know her more and realize, oh, this is a woman. But she was able to disguise herself as a male at points, her and Victoire, whereas Victoire could disguise herself as a male and be able to get into places that way. She could never disguise the color of her skin. She is putting these blinders up that allows her to ignore the marginalization and the disenfranchisement and the hardships that her friends are going through, and being able to say, well, just suck it up. It's just the reality of our situation. We can move on from this. Where honestly, they can't move on from this. You, Letty, can overcome the propaganda that is being spread, because ultimately, because of the privileges that you hold, the one marginalization that you have is greatly outnumbered by the privileges, and therefore you have the ability to afford to ignore the oppression that is happening to that one part of your identity, because ultimately you're getting the education that you want. You're able to do whatever, and just like you've been able to fight through all your hardships before, you're going to be able to fight for it in the future. Where when you're going through multiple marginalization, where you're dealing with multiple marginalized identities within you, it's a lot harder to say, if I give it my all, it'll matter. Because sometimes when you have multiple marginalizations, you can give it your all and it will not matter. For example, in Letty's interlude, they stated, why could they not see how fortunate they were to be allowed into these hollowed walls, to be lifted from their squalid upbringings into dazzling heights of Royal Institute translation? All of them had fought tooth and nail to win a seat in the classroom of Oxford. She was dazzled by her luck every day. She sat in a bodleian, thumbing through books that without her translator's privileges she could not have requested from stacks. Letty had defied fate to get here. They all had. So why wasn't that enough? They'd beaten the system. Why in God's name did they want so badly to break it as well? Why bite the hand that fed you? Why throw it all away? And of course, Letty can say that because, again, you leave here and you'll be fine. Like, you overcame all the hardships. Like, it's a great honor for you. But these hardships should not have been in place in the first place. You all are, like, every main character was highly qualified to be there, spoke multiple languages easily, fluently, passing their classes beautifully. They all deserved to be there. They had the standing to be there, the qualifications to be there. Hell, I would even say that some of them were overqualified to be there. So you should be there. If you are qualified to be someplace, if you demonstrate that you are able to keep up with the rigor of this academia, you deserve to be here. You shouldn't feel as though you owe it to people who don't give a crap about you to be appreciative of it. What am I going to appreciate? That you see the truth? Where you are standing, you hold all the power. What am I going to thank you for? Seeing me as human? Seeing that you can benefit from my knowledge and my qualifications? Because let's face it, if they were not qualified, they would not be there. If Oxford felt like these translators would not help in the English Empire, they would not be there. They are there because with what they can translate, they can further the reach and the spread and colonization of the British Empire. That is why they are there. So am I supposed to be happy that you can use me? I'm supposed to be appreciative that you found my value in me because I can help you instead of simply finding value in me as a human being. I should be happy that you find me to be one of the safe ones, one of the smart ones, one of the few in a million. I am just who I am, and there are many of me, but you are so rooted in your own racism, prejudices, and discrimination that you only find me valuable when it comes to my value to your own mission. No one should have to thank someone for that. And again, when you have multiple marginalizations, it's easier to see that because you're being constantly oppressed and across multiple of your identities, across multiple factors of yourself versus only having one. It's like, I've overcame this one marginalization of mine. I'm so lucky. It's why do I have to keep fighting for because of things that I cannot control, telling you that I should be deemed as lesser than? No, 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 no. I'm not going to thank you for knowing my worth because I knew it all along. Or at least that's how it should be. Everyone should know their own worth and should not thank another person for seeing it, especially if that person or institution is only seeing your worth to them, to their mission. They're not even seeing your worth as a human being. They're seeing your worth as a tool they can use towards their mission. That's not good. That's not what. Also, what a beautiful quote in such a timely manner as we have it. The white tears was that was my final nail in the bucket. I was like, oh my God. But Robin had stated it just so eloquently after they had finally had their moment of snapping and telling Letty the realities of what they were going to when she realized that they were holding secrets from her and that they were part of the secret society and that there were secrets that she did not know of them. And they finally have this moment where they're like, the characters are finally just like, there are so many oppressions that I feel. And Victoire mentions, like, I cannot even bathe in the communal bathroom because I'm a Black woman. I have to hike my way just to bathe. Like, I have to hike my way away from here just to bathe. Whereas you can just use the communal one because you are white and I am Black. And here she come crying. And Robin put it oh so eloquently, stating, still something did not seem right, and Robin could tell from Victoire's and Remy's faces that they thought so too. It took him a moment to realize what it was that grated on him, and when he did, it would bother him constantly. Now and thereafter, it would seem a great paradox. The fact that after everything they had told Letty, all the pain they had shared, she was the one that needed comfort. And that lies the problem and is so timely to the current situation. You get an entire book of people of color saying, the country that I come from, where I was born in, is being ruled and abused by the British Empire. Colonization has ultimately destroyed my culture, or tried to, at the very least, to destroy my culture. I am standing up against this. I have gone through this marginalization at school. I have gone through this oppression or this fact, or I have had to suck up and kiss the ass of white people my entire life simply so that they could see my value in them, and it has been tough for me. Victoire, I have to hike my way just to wipe my ass or use the bathroom, and it has been so tough on me. Remy and Victoire, I've had to run away from people trying to assault me and harm me simply because of the color of my skin. I am going through constant daily reminders that those that have the power, those that I am at this institution with, some of which have less qualifications than I do to be here. Because let's not forget, I had to overachieve in my academia to even be considered valuable to be at this institution. Be here, they still do not view me as enough. Oh, it hurts your feelings that I mentioned this? Oh, you're the one crying. I can't cry. I can't show I'm angry. I can't show any emotion towards this, because if I do, I'm crazy or angry, or I'm the angry Black woman, or I'm ungrateful for being here, or I am a problem, or I'm being uncivilized, and that is the problem. You get to emote, you get to cry and get comforted. If I cry, I'm not going anywhere. I'm weak. And if a weak person with my marginalizations, a weak person with my identities do not get to where I want to go in life. And so I cannot cry. I cannot be angry. I cannot show any emotion but passiveness. I can't do anything but simply be here and act as though the daily pressures I am under are not swallowing me whole. But you go ahead, white woman. You cry. I'll comfort you. Again. Alright, please forgive the change of angles. I had to wait for my battery to recharge, but with the switch of angles, go ahead and check out Babel on the side. That is also propped up on my other copy of Babel. But back to the characters. So next up, let's talk about Victoire, who in my notes I so perfectly coined the survivor before I knew the outcome. I mean, I was supposed to say, with her being the only survivor in the group, but technically Letty survived. I will discuss why that upsets me so much when we get to the next character. But yeah, Victoire. I will say I did want more from Victoire. When I first was just first glance of her. Can you guys see her? Can you see her? If you can't, let me help you. Not the glare, but you see good, sis? First time seeing that photo or that image of her or that portrayal, whatever. Seeing that version of her plus the version in the bookmark that I have, I was like, sis, what you got for me? Because I know you got something. I was so very excited to see Victoire just on first glance, like just first appearances. I was like, y'all know I'm going to love her. And at first, I did feel quite disappointed in her because we didn't get much of her. She was the silent one in the group. She did not say much. She very much chose her words very wisely. I will say her and Robin in the group were like the two quiet ones. But whereas Robin was quiet because he was insecure in some ways, in some fashion, Victoire was quiet as a survival instinct, as a way of purposely running under the radar. And so I found myself actually quite liking the fact that Victoire was quiet. Well, liking and then having very complex feelings towards it, because whereas I was ready for Victoire to be the voice of reason, I was ready for her to lead in some way or be even more of a badass than anyone was expecting her to be, which to some extent she was. I just wanted her to speak up more. I wanted her to hand Letty her ass on a platter. I wanted her to read Letty to filth, okay? And while we did get some just like quick quips or just quick insightful things she would say that were just quick and to the point, she did not show very much emotion at all. Even when she had all right to be upset, all right to yell at Letty and just let her rage out, she still very calmly and without emotion stated the facts of her situation. And I found that quite interesting. Victoire is Haitian descent and French nationality. Her story is quite complex, and it's one that we do not get until the very end. Victoire's perspective is the one that we get as the epilogue, and when I tell you, it was everything I thought it was going to be and even better. Like I said, I had coined Victoire the survivor very quickly, because I was, well, not very quickly. It was again towards like one of the later parts, but I was just like, earlier parts, I was just like, I want to hear more from Victoire. I want to hear more. I want her to say something. I want her to react to something. Of course, we had that ball scene in which Victoire and Letty were both harassed because they are women. But, there were some racial undertones to the harassment that Victoire faced. And I wanted her to get upset. I wanted her to speak up more. And she just was quiet. She had her moments of stating facts. For example, when it came to what she wanted to focus on for her project and not being able to focus on something that would be able to help individuals in Haiti, and instead had to focus on something that would be more beneficial to the British Empire, she would be more visibly upset, and she would speak up a bit more. And especially when it came to Letty finding out about the Hermes Society and that her friends had been keeping secrets from her, and finally everyone started to speak up about the marginalizations and the discriminations that they had faced in their academic careers. Finally, Victoire was speaking up more, and I really appreciated it. Victoire really became the person that was able to ground Robin at the end, and I think that that is very important. And I hate to admit it, but it wasn't until they were on the run, when Robin had killed Professor Lovell, and they all went on the run and had to hide his death and everything, Victoire really came through. Sis was able to stay calm. Seemed like she was able to stay calmer than the other people. And she was just strong and steady throughout the entire thing. When it was left to just her and Robin, she was, again, the voice of reason. And what I loved about this is the exact same thing that I was having trouble with at the beginning, is that Victoire, for all intents and purposes, is a direct contrast to the stereotypical Black woman. And what I mean by that is that stereotypically Black women, I know because I am one, are seen as loud, abrasive, angry. We have the stereotype of the angry Black woman. We have these very negative connotations, and so I wanted so badly at the beginning for that to be represented, because again, I stand by the fact that rage and anger is a valid emotion, especially when it comes to you being put in harm's way, or discrimination you feel, or complete and utter nonsense that you have to face on a day-to-day basis. Again, she wasn't allowed to bathe in the quarters with everybody else. She was harassed at the dance. She was harassed when there were mentions of her being harassed at the beginning of their academic career because of the color of her skin, in a very similar way that Remy was harassed, having to go through all of that. And yet she just stayed calm during it all. And the whole time I was like, you have every right to be angry, and I wish that you would tell us how angry you are, which she didn't really do. Until the end, until the loss of Remy, until the epilogue, and until she and Robin are going back and forth at the end of the book, does she really let her anger and frustration of the situation out? And that is when I realized, oh, she's not quiet because she's not impacted by this. The very opposite. She's quiet because she knows the pressures that she is under. She knows that if she were to react with her anger, if she was to react with her emotions first, the way that Letty gets to, she would be seen as crazy. She would be considered angry, and all those stereotypes that are already placed on Black people, on Black women in particular, would be placed on her, and she won't be able to go further in her academic career or further in anything. And there was a part of me that understood that, in the kind of W.E.B. Du Bois sense of double consciousness, of understanding who you are and how you perceive yourself versus how other people, especially those with authority or those with a more Eurocentric centered viewpoint or perspective, will see you because of the color of your skin or because of your nationality or race. You understand both how you are from your own perspective, but also the perspective of others. However, and even in me understanding that she understands how others perceive her, and so she's trying to combat her, I was still upset because, again, I think there is true value in rage, and while I can appreciate her refusing to let them get to her in that point until it truly mattered, there's still that part of me that was just like, rage is a valid emotion, anger is a valid emotion, and we really got to see that towards the end. I just wanted to see more. Ultimately, at the end, I realized Victoire's character, her silence, her refusal to be who others would perceive her to be because of the color of her skin, was an act of survival. When we read the epilogue, we kind of see how she does, like at the beginning at least, the beginning coming into Oxford, due to her background, due to her mother, in some sense, she had kind of internalized the stereotypes of what Black people were, because her mother had internalized that and had kind of looked at the white people that she was working under as like her white saviors and stuff, and then teaching her daughter that. Victoire kind of felt the same way until she was left with people who did not value her at all. And then her survival was all about getting her into Oxford, forging those documents so that she can further her academic career like she was supposed to be able to in the first place. Once she made it to Oxford, her survival was to do what she needed to do to graduate Oxford and get a position that only she could have as one of the few translators that are able to get these studies done and to pass them and to then further the career. The translators in the society are very few and fleeting, and so having this power, having the ability to make it to Oxford, and if it didn't get as bad as it was, and let's say they were in the class before them or two classes before them, before it was very obvious of what was going on, or when it was a bit more easy to ignore what the British Empire was doing, like Victoire would have graduated, she would have had a career, and she would have been able to care for herself. Like, her instinct is to survive, and she will make any sacrifices to do so. And so in the epilogue it states, Victoire's understanding of Haitian history is of curses in the night, of magnificent palaces named Sans Souci, home to the first Black king in the New World, of men with guns, of vague political disagreements she does not understand that somehow uprooted her life and sent her across the Atlantic. As a child, she knew her motherland as a place of violence and barbaric power struggles, for that is how they spoke of it in France, and that was what her exiled mother chose to believe. "We are lucky," whispered her mother, "that we survived." This is the same thing. Again, let's go back to Letty. This is the same thing Letty was saying. Like, why can't you just be grateful? Why don't they just see how lucky we are that we made it through? No. I shouldn't feel lucky or happy or feel grateful that you view me as human, because you really don't. All your actions, everything you do, tell me that you think that I am less than you. I'm not going to be grateful because you think that I am a valuable tool to your mission. If you want me to be grateful for that, I don't know what to tell you. That's not something I'm going to be proud of. Ultimately, I am here because you are valuable in my mission, and I'm not going to forget that. And that's what I really felt like was going on with Victoire. She was doing things that would help her to survive. And when it came to the epilogue of her saying, I wanted to stay, how great would it be if I could just stay with my friends and we all die together? If I I was in school with these 4 people, and Rami is gone, and Robin is about to be gone too. Like Anthony's gone, everyone's gone. How great would it be if we could just all be gone together? I don't have to fight anymore. I don't have to be strong anymore. I can just let go. I don't have to be on guard. I can just be done. And her deciding, no. I don't care how much I have to fight. I don't care how strong I have to be. I don't care how much pain I carry with me. I carry their stories with me, and I will not let my story end, because I will not let their story end. I'm going to find the other members of the Hermes Society, and I'm going to continue on with this mission. Victoire is a survivor. Her every instinct is to survive, even when it hurts her. At the end, she's dealing with the loss of her mother, all of her friends, betrayal, all the harassment and discrimination she faced in her life, holding all of these things on her own shoulders by herself, and yet she's still like, I have more fight in me. I would love to say I'm done. I would love to say it's too much. I would love to be like Robin and say that it was too much. I'm done. I have fought the good fight. I have given all that I have got. But Victoire has more. Her instincts aren't saying, I gave it everything I got. Is it? It's saying, I have more. I'm gonna keep going. She wants to make it to a long life. There's no expectation that a Black girl or a Black person is going to make it in to old age, or that they're going to live a life of luxury or even just a comfortable lifestyle. There's no expectation for that in the society, and yet Victoire wants that, and she is going to do everything in her power to receive it. And that there's something quite beautiful about that to me. And if anything, I just wanted to know more about Victoire, although there was something quite beautiful of her character, in the subtlety of her character. I wanted more, because I swear almost every time she spoke, I was like, now that's a word. Like that was very powerfully said and so eloquently put. And I was like, see, like I knew you had wisdom in you. You just seem so wise. Like I knew this was in you. However, I wish we got more. And so, if anything, that was my real tug of war with Victoire as a character. Next up, we have Rami, who I so affectionately called the chameleon, because boy oh boy, man oh man, can this man blend in, oh my god, to all environments. Let's get one thing straight. I immediately loved Remy. Like, I was just like, he's funny, he's goofy. Like, those are the type of characters that I am often drawn to. But he also came so quick with these peaks and these, like, peekaboo moments of, haha, I'm smart. Like, I'm wise too. I know some things. I have my own thoughts, and I'm not completely blinded by the environment that we are in. Like, I have my own experiences that have impacted the reason that I blend in so more, and why I put on this front as the goofy character. And I just absolutely love Rami as a character. I mean, oh my goodness. He has to be one of, if not my absolute favorite character. He had everything. And again, this is somebody who is marginalized in so many different ways. Low income family. He's a person of color who presents as a person of color, and he's in a more marginalized religious group. And so I found Rami just so complex and so interesting. I loved the comedic releases that he was able to have, and also the real moments that he was able to have, just to show us like he is a real person with a real fleshed out character. I loved as we got to know him more, and because he does have this great ability to assimilate into the culture surrounding him. Like, he was able to have many friends outside the group, or seemingly got along with many people outside of the group. Despite the difficulties presented to him as a man of color, he was still able to find people who he got along with, or at least other people he got along with. I struggle to call anyone any of their friends, specifically because Letty was considered their friend to them, and we see how that worked out. So, not so much. Don't really want to call them that. But Rami, as a character, I just thought was very interesting. And again, the way he was able to assimilate to all different friend groups and different people, and assimilate to be more camaraderie with their like white peers, and still like getting along with everyone. And at first, I would just be very confused, because I think Robin was confused, and that was the perspective we were supposed to give, because I would just be like, how can you say some of the things you say, Rami, and then also have these moments where you seem to want to be like them? I'm very confused. And then we realize in his interlude, he states, "Lie, Ramiz. This was the lesson, the most important lesson he'd ever been taught. Hide, Ramiz. Show the world what they want. Contort yourself into the image they want to see, because seizing control of the story is how you in turn control them. Hide your faith. Hide your prayers, for Allah will still know your heart." I thought that was just, very beautiful. It demonstrates the real internal struggle that Rami is under. Before, he just seems like this goofy character, and then we get his interlude and we realize that this entire time he is on a mission to make the sacrifices his family, his father has made for him and for his siblings, like make it all worth it. For him to finally be in a place that no one else in his family has made it to. He wants it to be worth it. The sacrifices that were made by his parents and by his family for him to be where he is, he wants it to be worth it. Not to mention, the only way he sees that being worth it is to assimilate until that he is able to take from the white man what the white man has taken from him. He was hiding so much, and he hid it all with a great smile. And when he was reflecting on the man that paid for his college and everything, of how he had to do like this like show for him to seek his approval, and how even his father had to just swallow the shame that he was feeling in all of this. Those sacrifices were meant to be worth it, because he was meant to do better. He was supposed to be in a better spot than where his father was. As a young boy, he idolized these men who had money and could chat it up and have and joke, and he had idolized these men with power and money that were white, did not look like his family. His family worked for, he had idolized them until he understood that they don't really see him as human. They see him as an act, as something that they can toy with. They see him as an experiment to see just how smart the colored person can be. And once realizing that, Rami kind of ends up on this mission of, I will play your game, but I will play it for my own benefit. And it's just unfortunate. In Rami's case, unlike Victoire, who was kind of similar, Victoire was more like, I will not fall for the stereotypes you place on me, and due to that, I will hold my place among you until I take from you what I need to go further in my mission. Rami kind of had a similar thing of, I will assimilate with you. I will do the whole juck and jive. I will laugh. I will do all that thing. I will really put on a show for you all. And in that assimilation, I will take from you what I want from you and go off and survive. Go off and help my people, or go off and help my family in some way. Him and Victoire were very similar. Just unlike Victoire, he did not get to survive because Letty's trifling ass. That was the problem. Now, this is how Rami, like, this was my first instance of knowing just how aware he was, because he came off as such a goofy character. I was fully preparing for him and Letty to get together at the very beginning, at the dance situation happened. And then when he was like, I'm doing that. That seems like a problem. She does not know anything about me except that she thinks that I am handsome. We can talk about the fetishization of men of color by white women, but that's unnecessary for this instance. I mean, it's somewhat necessary, but it's not that big of a conversation that we need to have today, because there's plenty that have already been said. But for Rami to be like, that's a bad decision. You and I both know that. I don't have no business with that white girl. It's not going to work out. She don't know nothing about me or the plights or the discrimination or the things that I've been through. And I don't really know all that much about what she's been through. Her not knowing what I've been through is very harmful. And therefore, 1 + 2 is just not equal. We're not getting together. It's not happening. Like, I don't know. For some reason, reading Rami's thing, although he said it very calmly and more articulate than I said it, it did seem like a panic to me. It seemed like a no. Like, it seems like when he very calmly would just like ignore Letty, and so if anything, he kind of like ghosted her, but in real life, because he was literally right there. Like, she could see you, bro. This is not over text. It was like an in-person ghost. He was just like, I'm not acknowledging this. We're just gonna ignore this until this problem goes away. It did not. The problem cost him his life. And for that, Letty will always be one of the, I can't stand her. I would have been fine with her. I mean, not fine is dramatic. I wouldn't have accepted it either. How do I say this? As a character, there we go. As a character, I could handle in the story in the storyline, if she had just betrayed them, I could handle that to some extent. But the fact that she betrayed them and killed Rami. Ooh, if I could fight a fictional character, now you deserve these hands. Letty, I was letting you go. I was letting it be. It was whatever. She is what she is. It's whatever. You killed Rami, and therefore, you must pay. You must pay. Oh, no, I can't do it. Now I'm Robin. Now I'm feeling like Robin feels. Now I'm feeling like Griffin. Now I'm pissed. Now I feel all the rage and anger, and you gotta go. So Remy, I just loved, because he was so aware of the realities of their situation while also still being able to find joy, still being able to laugh and goof, and still, he felt to me like he was grounded in his purpose, but also willing to live life. And that wasn't I loved it so much. I loved Remy. I loved him so much. I ended up really wanting him and Victoire to get together. I just wanted Remy to be happy and alive. That's all I wanted from this book. And I did not get it. But I still love it because it was so beautifully written. Last but certainly not least, Robin. The main character of the book, the one whose perspective we get the majority of this book. He is coined two hearts in my notes because that was his huge dilemma throughout the entirety of the book, of feeling as though he had two hearts. The part of him that was like an Englishman, he could pass for white, he was attending Oxford, he had this benefactor that was paying for his education, and there were these like happy things that he was able to think of in his like new life. However, there was also this part of him that remembered his home that he grew up and was raised in for the most part. He remembers his mother. He remembers Canton. He remembers it in his memory, and they are in its home for a good portion of time until he returns back and realizes that home doesn't feel like home anymore. And the kind of the fear he felt on his way to Canton and feeling like, I haven't been here in years and I doubt that it's going to feel the same. And then that confirmation, that heartbreaking, heart-shattering confirmation that I no longer belong here. I no longer belong home. Oh, just broke my heart and truly changed Robin. Prior to going back to Canton, he was able to romanticize the life of an Englishman, to romanticize the life of an academic in academia, and romanticize kind of the perspective of a colonizer, because Professor Lovell has been telling him all this time, you're so much better off here, and that was such a primitive life that you lived before, and look at the food that I'm able to give you here, and how much better your life is here. You were sick and almost dead when I found you. Now you are living a life of somewhat opulence, and you have a roof over your head, and you're not sick at all, and you have all these great things. You're an academia man and a translator and this great person and this well-educated, astounding person that you couldn't be back home. So remember what I gave you. You owe me your life because I am the reason that you have it. I saved you from death. Therefore, you owe me your life. Nah, baby, nah. No. If you haven't been able to tell, I don't like this. Because again, the only reason you care about now that was dramatic. That man cares nothing about Robin or his other damn son. Like, this is your child. Oh my God. And you still don't care about him. Imagine. But the only reason he doesn't even pretend to care for him. The only reason you paid for a woman to care for him is because at the end of the day, Robin existing, Griffin existing, they were opportunities for your mission to go further. And that was all you cared about. And when they fought back, when they were no longer willing to be tools in your mission, you cast them aside, or you try to, we don't know what happened that night that went on the ship, because we only got Robin's perspective, and he said, I don't know what happened. I blacked out. I don't know what happened. But you seemingly were going to harm Robin for standing up to you. He doesn't owe you anything. People are not tools. We are not weapons. We are simply people. And I feel like I keep having to say this in our Kwong books. Like, can they just be people? Like, I know they're powerful. I know they can do things that you can't do. But can they just be people? It's not their fault that you're incompetent. It's not their fault that you weak. But also, again, I had kind of mentioned this before. I really enjoyed Robin's arc as a character, especially the fact that we get the majority of his perspective throughout the book. We really got to see the journey that he was on. Again, this romanticization of this European lifestyle that is so great in his eyes and so fantastic. And then, though, again, the two hearts really wanting to go back home. And then once he is home, realizing that home is no longer home. And that the British Empire is trying to impose on his home, and when they aren't fighting for it, the war that they're willing to go to, and him not being willing to participate in that, is when I decided that there are two other hearts, or rather, there is a devil and an angel on his shoulder, and yet both of them have a very similar, very, very similar care or want from this. I would say the devil on his shoulder. I don't know which side the devil is usually on, but I don't have one. But and I realized that kind of the two people that impacted Robin the most were Rami and Griffin. Griffin being his half brother. Like I had stated before with Rami, his ability to assimilate into white culture and to use that to get to where he wanted to go, or at least that being his plan of assimilation. Not we are going to be rebellious, but we are going to rebel in a way where they can't see it coming. There was no violence in Rami's plans, whereas Griffin, Robin's half brother, had all the violence. He was just a full revolutionary, guns a-blazing. He want all the smoke. Like, he was just ready for action. And while, again, these characters both want change, the way they want to incite the change is very different. And ultimately, it is the loss of both of these people, Robin's best friend, his roommate, and his half-brother, that lead him to a place where he is leading the lockdown and is leading the shut-in, and finally to a place where he is ready to burn Babel down. I mean, my goodness. Beautiful. Oh my gosh, for so long he was trying to stay, like, again, the angel on his shoulder being Rami, the devil on his shoulder being Griffin. Neither of them were like, let's just be tools to their own devices. Let them use us as tools. Let them use us as weapons. We don't care. It's fine. Let them use us as tools to sharpen their weapons. It's fine. Both of them were like, no, this isn't how it's going to go down. I have my mission. I have my goals. There is a way to intersect this and to make it so that the power that the British Empire holds is not as great as it once was. And especially when working with the Hermes societies. However, Griffin is a revolutionary. He is trying to incite, like, he wants violence. He is like, at some point, these small actions are not enough. The empire is too great. These small actions aren't doing anything ultimately. We need to make it so that they stop. And he has this grandeur in the actions that need to take place that are quite violent. And yet Rami is still like, no, we can do the small actions and we can go forward, or we can do what are actually large actions. We can assimilate into the cultures. We can stop them, but there is no rush. There was no sense of urgency. There's no rush. We don't have to. Or even there was some type of rush. See, I'm kind of back and forth because I don't want it to seem like Rami was hesitant in anything. He thought about things a lot more. It seemed as though he was like, there's a lot on the line for me. I have a lot more to risk. And that might be because out of all the other characters, again, except for Letty, Rami is the only one that if he goes back home at some point, he can return to family. Robin's mother is dead. Victoire's mother is dead. Rami, out of everyone else, he was the only one who had family that he could return to if he wanted to go back home. Or if he did go back home, he had people who loved him that he could return to. Granted, it would still be hard to go back home because, again, he might feel similar things to what Robin is feeling of, like, I've been far away from home for so long. I don't know if I still connect. I don't know if it'll still feel like home, and not wanting to have that heartbreaking and earth-shattering moment where home is no longer home, or feeling like you no longer belong home. He still had people who loved him in his homeland. Like, he still had people he could return to, which makes the fact that he died even more heartbreaking, because he was the only one that had people who loved him he could return to. And so he's operating in this way of, I have things to lose. I don't want my family to have to mourn me. I have people who will be hurt emotionally if I don't survive. We can't just blow things up, because I have people I love I have to look out for. I have people I love that I'm doing this for. Griffin, when you've lost everything, it's a lot easier to want to take everything down with you, as we see with Robin. He has lost his best friend, his brother. He's been betrayed by another friend, and that no one's listening. There's no change in what's being done. They blew up a freaking bridge, and that still was not enough. There's just not, like, he's like, I have given my all, and that is not enough. The last thing I can give is my life, and blow this all up with me. It's just unfortunate, because if it was not for Letty, if it was not for her killing Rami would have been with Victoire. He would have left. He had things that he would have. He had things he could return to. He had loved ones he could return to. When Professor L is killed, when he dies, that was the spark of them going on a run. And that was the first spark of Robin saying, no, what the British Empire is doing is absolutely wrong. What it has done to the place that I called home, the place I was born, is not okay. And I refuse, like, you're wrong. You guys are on the wrong side of history on this case. That was the first time he had said that, and just seconds later, Professor L is dead and gone. And so that was one phase of Robin's identity that we got to see. This one phase in the metamorphosis that is Robin and his journey in this, going from romanticizing the English lifestyle, to realizing that no, the things that the British Empire are doing is not okay, being marked by Professor L's death, and then moving forward to the running and everything, and having the death of his best friend and his brother being the spark to an action step forward, to saying, no, we're going to have a shut-in. We're not going to allow them to have access to the silver. Then, ultimately, when it's decided they don't care, there's no amount that we can take away from them, at some point they get to come back to the silver. They get to have all this power again. But once again, this was just another blip in their power that they will soon overcome, deciding, I will sacrifice everything. We will burn this place down then. I'm going to give it my all, and my all includes my life. Quite beautiful, because he was struggling. When he said, every day since my life was rescued at my home in Canton, every day since then has just been borrowed time. Like, I've already gone past my life expectancy. So the rest of this is just like extended time that I got. This is what my extended time was meant for. I'm not leaving knowing that they will just go back to business as usual. I am burning down everything with me, including the text in here and any silver that gets wrecked in the crossfire. Just being like, again, I don't feel like this is going to be the end of the empire, but it's going to hurt them it's going to be a lot harder to recover from. Very beautiful, very much appreciated. I think, just again, these characters are so complex, and so much can be said about them. I just value them all independently and what they meant as a person who, again, has gone to higher education, and especially when it comes to going to school in a PWI, a predominantly white institution. I have had experiences where I felt as though I didn't belong, or I had called people friends that didn't care for me or my lived experiences, and I myself have ignored microaggressions and things that people who claim to be my friends or who claim to care for me have said. I've done all the things that Victoire has done. I have been the quiet one, even though I myself was angry with how quiet I was. I have been the louder one and the goofy one like Remy, all the while being like, okay, you might think I'm the nice one, but don't get reckless with it. I haven't quite made it to the Griffin Robin stage. I don't want to make it to that stage. I feel like anyone who has been marginalized, who has been oppressed over and over again and has been pushed over and over again. Once you push someone so much and so far, you don't then get to tell them how to react to the harm that you've placed on them. I'm trying to think if I have any closing things to say. I think that was really it. I don't really want to focus on other characters except for those four. I mean, Professor L, who I've officially given up trying to say that man's name. Professor L, Griffin is an amazing character in and of itself. There is a lot of things in the book that I did not speak of. I just wanted to focus on the four main characters because they are just so interesting, and I really appreciate them and what R.F. Kuang has done with these characters. I personally feel like they are very much fleshed out, and if you somehow made yourself the victim of this story for being white, I need you to read a book. Like, actually educate yourself. Like, do something except for get on R.F. Kuang's internet acting a damn fool. What is your problem? Oh, I'm sorry. I was just like, oh, are you proud of that? You not feel shame? I guess the only way that I want to close this out is to our Kwong. If you're seeing this, thank you. Thank you for letting your lived experience translate into a beautiful story like this that was just so intricate and fun, and I just loved every part of it. I loved the footnotes, especially the ones that weren't so academia based and was just like notes that happened of events that happened off page or things like that. Like, that was just fun for me. I loved your author's note at the beginning. This book was really great and so beautifully written, so beautifully crafted. I can tell it was done with care. I loved every moment of it. So again, to R.F. Kuang, thank you so much for one academic to another. Just thank you for sharing this perspective. I related a lot to many of the experiences of Victoire, Rami, and Robin, and quite literally every other character that ended up in Hermes Society. I really related to them, and I am happy that for once our stories are the focal point in the center of a amazing book such as this. I can't wait to release more books. I'm so happy that I got to read this. I'm so happy. This is like, I want to hug it. This is definitely one of my top books of 2022, and I'm just so happy that I've read them. I just want to hug them. But if you've stayed this long in the video, hey, how long was it? But with that being said, that is the end of this video. If you enjoyed this video, if you enjoyed my face, my voice, my extraness, go ahead and press that like button down below and press the subscribe button and bell notification if you would like to be notified when I upload. If you like to stay connected with me, as I would love to stay connected with you, I of course have all my social medias linked down below. And if you'd like to support this channel further, I of course have my Amazon wish list and coffee linked down below as well. If you'd like to leave a comment down below, I am more than open to have a actual conversation about this book that actually is open to discourse. If you don't love the book, let me know why you didn't like the book, as long as it isn't something like it's racist to white people, because that's not a thing. And please do not invalidate the experiences of, like, the lived experiences of people of color in academia. Again, this book was written based on the author's own experiences in Oxford. So just please don't invalidate that experience. It's very valuable. And if anything, let's just all learn together and promise to just be a little bit more aware and cognizant and kind. Like, I know I led with emotion and anger at the beginning, but genuinely I did that because those words hurt me. With my own lived experiences dealing with people like that, like, I just felt harmed by those words, and I genuinely did not mean to be mean to any. Like, I genuinely hope that somehow, some way, this is edited into some form of something beneficial and not adding to negativity in this. I just wanted to spread my thoughts and my opinions, and I want to highlight the importance of sharing your opinion, or highlight the importance of sharing your experiences, as long as your way of sharing your experiences is not invalidating someone else's. We all have our experiences as they are, but to invalidate another person's is just really rude and harmful, and you never know who you are hurting in the crossfires of that. So just be mindful of that. Let me know if you read Babel. Let me know your thoughts on the book. What was your rating? What were some things that stood out to you? Yeah, I guess just all things Babel. If you haven't read it, do you want to read it? I'm very curious. And yeah. With that being said, I believe that is everything, although I am probably forgetting something because I always forget something. But bye, guys.